So here's a presentation on my 2026 December of the Roots Tech virtual booth, and it's about uncovering DNA haplogroups of Middle Eastern origins. I'll try to make this as quick as possible and as straightforward as possible. First, my name is Haydar, and I'm the Arab World Account Manager at FamilyTreeDNA, one of the senior information specialists. I'm also the head of the Big Y specialist team. The slides themselves actually deal with a number of DNA haplogroups that we have traced their migration path, and they go back. They're European haplogroups, and they go back to the region we currently call as, or collectively call, and historically as the Fertile Crescent. The Fertile Crescent encompasses today is Iraq, Anatolia, the Levant, and the Lower Nile Valley. This area is very well known for the beginning of agriculture around the year 11,000 before Common Era, and most of these haplogroups are actually related to the diffusion of agriculture from the Fertile Crescent. We used our tool on the Discover page called Globetrekker, and Globetrekker was our guide in knowing these migration paths and also in being able to tell the years of these migration paths. Globetrekker is an amazing tool. You can find it at discover.familytdna.com, and then you go to Globetrekker, and of course you have to be logged in, and it will show you each haplogroup, the migration path of the haplogroup, and it uses archaeological sites to anchor, as well as modern testers' reported place of origin of the ancestors. Middle Eastern DNA haplogroups presence in Europe, as we said earlier, due to historical migrations and gene flow from the Middle East. This includes mainly Neolithic farmers, Phoenician and Greek colonization, Roman expansion, Islamic conquest, and other historical events such as the Ottoman era, and similar historical events. Now, what you see over here is actually more or less all haplogroups. It's a tree that represents all haplogroups and a globe. But what's our concern here is the examples I have taken, and I've started with more or less the oldest examples that I could find. For example, GP15, which is one of the G haplogroups branches, is estimated to have originated in the Fertile Crescent and have diffused from Anatolia during the agricultural expansion, the Neolithic expansion into Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, and then it found itself in other regions of Europe. Basically, and you will see this pattern throughout the presentation, is that we were able to tell these migration paths through reported ancestry and archaeological dig sites. How we tell that is that we are actually comparing branches. So if you take a look at the subsequent branches of GP15, such as Z6552, it also suggests multiple migration events. I'm not going to go into details here since this is just a presentation of what is this about. But mainly we compare the father branch, the sibling branches, and the subsequent branches under the branch we are assuming that it migrated from the Middle East to Europe during a historical time event. Another one, this is a famous for us, the genealogist, of the EM35 haplogroup, and is estimated to also have diffused to Europe from the Middle East during the Neolithic expansion. And it's also associated with the time frame where agriculture spread to Europe. Uh, if you take a look at the sibling branches of this branch and the upstream branches of this branch, all modern testers here uh, are from the Middle East, or I would say 90% of them, according to my knowledge. EV22 is mostly Middle Eastern, and the sibling branch L168 as well, and the dig sites are mainly in the Middle East, but you have this, uh, L618. Uh, I'm sorry, L168 is the sibling branch. EV22 is mostly Middle Eastern, and L162 is the one that diffused to Europe. Yes. Another example, L858, which is part of the German haplogroup. This is a more recent migration event. Uh, Most of the Arab tribes, for you who are genealogy experts or familiar with genealogy, know that most of the Arab tribes fall under the German haplogroup. This one more or less represents no middle point between being in the Middle East and being in Southern Europe, basically in what is historically called Iberia, or for the Arabs Al-Andalus, or what we today call the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal. Um, Again, here we find a pattern of a migration, and we find that through these sibling branches, such as FGC 11, which is where most of the Arab tribes are under. These are strictly Arab branches. So not only Middle Eastern, because the Middle East has a lot of ethnicities in it. It's very diverse, but it's mainly Arab. And we have another example of the J1 haplogroup, and this one actually corresponds even to a more rapid movement. This one I theorized, and it's actually somehow apparent from the migration path itself, is that it likely migrated to the uh, north of the Iberian Peninsula, and then to other places in southern Europe, northern Italy, probably Spain, during the 8th century Islamic conquest of southern Europe in Spain and Portugal. The way this was theorized is based on the sudden expansion and appearance over there. Uh, Also, to notice that the branches, if you take a look at them, the sibling branches are strictly Middle Eastern. We have another example of the J1 haplogroup, and the J1 haplogroup, we have a lot of examples from the J1 haplogroups. What I've taken is a number of branches that correspond to different time frame or historical eras. This one is predominantly Jewish. It shares a common ancestor with the Kohanim lineage at ZS1718. It has roots in the Middle East, and it also it shows a sudden appearance in Spain, roughly around the year 2000 before Common Era. However, this is the time to most recent common ancestor, and the diffusal or dispersal could be of a later date. Another example, and this one is way more recent, around the year 1650. It's a small branch under the T haplogroup, and it corresponds to the Middle Ages, so it could be any of these historical events that took place around the time. While we can correlate, we can never assume that it was the cause. But all we can do is theorize and correlate how these haplogroups found their way according to the time frame and the geographic areas that they went through. And I close this with speaking about notable connections that are actually from these haplogroups. For example, you have Thomas Jefferson. He is at the M70, and he's one of the from one of the branches of You know, TM70 wasn't discussed by itself, but a branch of TM70 was discussed, and so Thomas Jefferson belongs to that. We have L858 from the German Haplogroup, also found its way to Europe, Spain and Portugal, then later Eastern Europe, and that's Bennett Greenspan, the founder of FamilyTreeDNA. And you have Albert Einstein, who is an EM, actually we gave him that name, EMC2, and he is from the EM35 haplogroup. And we also have the Wright brothers, and we actually discussed L8, L618 in details. That pretty much concludes everything I have about this presentation. And hopefully you will find the slides and the information in it useful. Thank you.